Buncombe? It's Abby, and today I have two very exciting guests with me. I have our wonderful co-founder, Kay Olsen, and the amazing Don Brown, who is running for U.S. Senate.
Raise a flag of liberty, the land of the free, rejecting tyranny.
How are you guys doing today?
Pretty
Doing great,
well.
Abby. Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, we had you on here before, and I had such a blast talking to you. I remember as soon as we got off our last interview, I called Kay, and my jaw was on the floor, and I was like, "This is the guy. This is awesome." So how have things been going since we last talked?
Well, Abby, we've been crisscrossing the state, meeting with grassroots groups, meeting with Republican groups. Of course, we were in Buncombe County Friday night, and then Saturday morning, first in Cleveland County and Kings Mountain, with the GOP Republican men there, but there were women there as well, to a packed house. Went from there down to southeastern North Carolina to Duplin County and filmed a short clip in front of a closed cotton mill to talk about how the Democrats had killed our industry through NAFTA. Met with some supporters in Wilmington Sunday. Monday, we were not on the road. And then last night, Tuesday, we were in Pamlico County, the beautiful town of Oriental. Today, we're in New Bern, the colonial capital of North Carolina, one of the most beautiful towns in the country, by the way. If you haven't visited, you should. And then tomorrow night, and I have meetings here today, and then tomorrow night we'll be in Richmond County with the Richmond County GOP. And I've got it's the whole calendar is full, but that's all I can remember at the moment. But it's been a real blessing to be able to meet with fellow patriots. And our campaign is connecting with patriots, many who happen to be Republican, but it was patriots, who held the muskets and the pitchforks and challenged the British Empire before anybody ever heard of either a Democrat Party or a Republican Party. And that's who we're seeking to identify with. Most are Republicans, but we'll take Democrat patriots too. We'll take patriots who love their country, and who want to shake their fist in the face of tyranny. So the campaign's going well. We're picking up a lot of momentum, and very, very grateful for the support that we have. But this campaign is not about me. It's about us. It's about we, the people. We are going to take our country back or not. We are going to save our country or not. And that's the real issue that we all have to look at, not just in this Senate race, but every congressional race and every state and local race all over the country. Will we take our country back or not? And if we do, it will be through constitutional principles and a lot of prayer. And I'm committed to all that.
So, for those who may not have watched our last episode with you, can you give us a little 2-minute rundown of who you are and what you stand for?
Well, we had a great interview last time, and you had asked about my faith, and I told you then, I'll say again, my faith is absolutely central to everything that I do. We were talking about the history of the American Revolution, and I pointed out that one of the great battle cries, in addition to Sic Semper Tyrannis, some people got on me for repeating that, which is a state motto of Virginia, thus ever to tyrants. Also, there was no king but Jesus, and so King George is not our king, Jesus is our king. President Trump isn't our king. President Reagan wasn't our king. Jesus is our king, and that's what everything revolves around for me. And so I think that all policy decisions, most policy decisions, certainly at the state, federal level, and even other levels, are divided on the issue of biblical worldview versus secular humanism. You see it in so much policy, and whether it's a battle for life or the battle for national sovereignty. National sovereignty is a biblical issue. You go back to the Tower of Babel, when God came down and smashed man's pride and dispersed the nations with different languages. That's God's plan. He has sheep and goat nations. We pray that we will be a sheep nation. There are preferences biblically. And so all this drives me. The Bible is the infallible word of God, but the Constitution is a gift to our people, to we the people. It's a way that we are able to function as a society and as a nation that maximizes freedom as long as we put him first. And so that's kind of like my core philosophy. I hope that summarizes part of what we talked about, and I hope that helps.
Yeah, it's great. Always a pleasure to hear you talk about your faith. Like I said last time, it's so nice to be able to sit down and talk about how the Creator intertwines in every aspect of our lives. So I'm very curious. You know, how do you think that your leadership styles will differ yourself from the others that are running and Senator Tillis?
Well, I think what you have the very at the very best. And there have been two other establishment candidates in this race since I started way back late February, early March, somewhere in there. First was Tillis. He's very much establishment. I joke around that we ran him out of the race. Our campaign was so effective, but he left the race. I think President Trump gets all the credit really for that, but he needed to be gone. And now we have Michael Whatley, and Whatley, we know, endorsed Tom Tillis on March 21st to the Carolina Country Club, even after Tillis had tried to torpedo the nomination of Pete Hegseth, gone after Ed Martin, had gone after Trump on tariffs, asking about whose neck he's going to choke. After all that and even more, Whatley still endorsed Tillis. So we're dealing basically with the same old, same old. I think if you go with Republican establishment Republicanism, or I could say Republican establishmentism, however you want to bookend that, you're going to get more of the same, and more of the same. If you put an establishment Republican in there, number one, I don't think Michael Whatley can beat Roy Cooper. I mean, I don't think he's got the fire in him to do it. And there's a lot of negative spillover for Michael, just like there was for Tillis. A lot of it goes back to the 2023 NC Republican convention when he was attempted to get elected on a cell phone app. This was 3 years after we went through the Dominion debacle with President Trump's election, both in Antrim County, Michigan, where we first discovered the vote flip, the problems there, and in the state of Georgia. You would think 3 years later we would learn a lesson to use paper ballots instead of try to go to some sort of electronic thing. So anyway, I wasn't personally present there, but I've got 100 witnesses that have told me about it. You can't be the king of election integrity when you get elected on a cell phone, or try to, or laptops, or whatever they were using. And so my point is, the negatives are so high among grassroots Republicans. He's not going to win the election. We got to wake up. I'm going to go after Roy Cooper aggressively. I'm a former prosecutor. I know how to do this. I brought cases before, state Supreme Courts, federal courts of appeal. I filed cases with the United States Supreme Court. I'm a constitutional lawyer, and I'm going to use the skill set to go after Roy Cooper, and I'm going to chase him all over the state. I'm going to remind him what he did to this state during COVID with his unconstitutional vax and mask mandates. I've said many times on the campaign trail that the last time I saw my daddy alive was looking through the outside glass wall of a nursing home in Plymouth, North Carolina. My home county that I grew up in is Washington County in the eastern part of the state. It is the poorest county in North Carolina, and one of the smallest. I think there are about 13,000 people down there, more people in the west side of Asheville than in my entire county. And it was a cold day. It was a frozen day. My sister and I were standing outside on frozen grass looking through, waving at my daddy because of Roy Cooper. It is personal to me. I'm going to remind him of that. I'm going to remind him of what he did that shut down more than half of North Carolina restaurants that never recovered. I'm going to remind him of how he pushed the dangerous vax jab. And by the way, Michael Whatley did the same thing. Whatley stood in front of the state Republican Party headquarters and pushed the jab, pushed Fauci's deadly jab. I'm going to take the jab, or he called it the vax. I'm going to take the vax. Then he said, second point, check with your doctor if you got a question. Then he said, it isn't political. It's about science. I mean, come on. You know how many people have been harmed by that? A lot of people dropped dead because of that. It was highly irresponsible. You're not going to see more of a bifurcation in terms of issues. Make America healthy again is a huge, huge issue that is out there. And it's one of the three hot button issues that we're seeing on the campaign trail. And you won't see a bigger difference between me and the other candidates than when it comes to medical freedom. I'm going to push also federal protection so that never again can the federal government or private employers force people to take experimental jabs into their arms. And it's not going to be to prohibit just experimental vaccines or vaccines, period, but also anything else. They'll be coming with microchips soon. If the United States dollar falls, the next step will be microchips, either in the forehead or in the hand. And we need to get ahead of that with federal protection. So I'm going to push a mask and Vaccine Protection Act, which will prohibit, if passed, anything being injected into people's bodies. This could never happen again. I don't think you're going to hear this type of talk or this type of vision from anybody else running for the United States Senate, certainly not in North Carolina.
You used a term a moment ago, establishment republicanism, and that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. I know what I think about it, and I'm very curious. What do you think about, like, what do you think that term means? And is it the same thing as like a rhino? I've heard the term derp. What do you think about that?
Well, these are all great questions, and I was kind of defining on the fly. So I think I said establishment republicanism and Republican establishmentism. They probably mean the same thing. But you're asking a very good question. To me, it's a go along, get along philosophy. It is at least a peripheral acknowledgement or commitment to globalism. You remember George H.W. Bush talking about a new world order. No new world orders here. I'm totally opposed to that. It is traditionally a tolerance. It is a tolerance for dumping American jobs overseas. For example, Tillis. Establishment republicanism would oppose tariffs, for example, because tariffs bring protection to American jobs. So when Trump proposes tariffs, and he studied history and he saw what happened in the McKinley administration, as he said, even in his interview with Joe Rogan, we were making so much money off tariffs, we had to come up with commissions to figure out how to spend the money. Tillis says, who am I going to choke if this doesn't work? You see, that's establishment republicanism, because tariffs, you see, help American products and not foreigners. Or when we talk about establishment republicanism, look at Tillis and his record on the border. He fought Trump on a border wall. He also wrote an op-ed in 2019 when Trump wanted to declare an emergency of the border, then opposing an emergency of the border. So establishment republicanism, traditionally, you can look at some of the policies they embrace. They have traditionally embraced, immigration, turn a blind eye in many cases to illegal immigration, and propose legal immigration policies that are harmful to the nation. So we got a problem not just with illegal immigration, with legal immigration also. I'm going to push to end legal immigration from Sharia-based countries, where there are certainly countries that are on the foreign domestic terror list. But establishment republicanism has been tolerant for all that and tolerant for Wall Street profits. I mean, you saw so many of them getting in and pushing the jabs, and so it's a go along, get along type of mentality. And I've said before, our country is on the precipice of going off a cliff. And what the president's done here is giving us a period of time, which is a respite in many ways. I call it the eye of a hurricane, where there is a surrealistic peace, but yet we can see the damage that the Democrats, the hurricane, has done all around us. President Trump will certainly be out of office under the 22nd Amendment, which limits the president to serving 2 elected terms in January of 2029. It's coming up too fast. And I get that right. I got that right. And so we're going to have another president. And maybe it's J.D. Vance, hopefully so. But the storm is coming back. And what we have to understand is we don't arrest, for example, this $37 trillion national debt. We lose the dollar. Once we lose the dollar, then we are really in trouble. And I don't see certainly none of my opponents are raising the alarm on the explosion of the natural debt like I am. None of them are talking about wanting to take out the deep state. We've got to go and we've got to cut out the deep state. If an agency is not constitutionally authorized, it's got to go. Trump's going after the Department of Education, but we have a weak Republican Congress. It's been over 200 days. We control the Congress, and the Department of Education hasn't been eliminated yet. So we've got to have strong, clarion voice on the floor of the Senate and of the House. I can't guarantee you that I can get everybody to vote for this, but I can guarantee you I'll be beating this drum every day, and the people will wake up and demand change. We got to light a fire. I was talking last night at Pamlico County. I directed some camps here in Pamlico County, when I was younger, in my 20s, and they would sing these Christian songs. One was like, "It only takes a spark to get a fire going." I don't remember the name of the song. Kay may remember the song, but it takes a spark to get a fire going, and I'm prepared to deliver that spark.
You had mentioned earlier that, and I've heard you talking about education and trying to help some of these issues. If I were to ask you what are the 3 top issues you'd go to DC to start fighting for, what would those be?
Well, the three that jump out that I usually hit on the campaign trail are: 1, attacking the national debt by going to war against the deep state. They go hand in hand. You take the deep state out and you use the money to retire the national debt and lower it. Number 1. Number 2 is medical freedom. This is a dangerous, dangerous situation. They experimented with us in COVID, and unfortunately, too many of our own people lowered their heads and said, Yes, sir, Mr. Pfizer. Yes, sir, Mr. Moderna. Yes, sir, Mr. Fauci. Lowered their heads and went along with it. So medical freedom is big. We've got to get out ahead of that before they start justifying wanting to put chips in us. And then number three is out of control federal judges. I will go to war from a constitutional standpoint against these out of control federal judges. They don't have the power to do what they're doing. It was the greatest fear that the opponents of the Constitution had. Those are three that I would run on and hit on. Obviously, there are many more than that that are of very high importance, and I don't mean to diminish anything else, but you asked me for three.
Yeah. No, I understand. What can you give us just a 5-minute background of your give us 5 minutes on your background so that we can make sure that we've got that covered in this video
Sure.
as well as the other one.
Well, I'm a North Carolina native. I was born in Plymouth, in Washington County. Went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Decided I wanted to be a naval officer, so I took the AOCS exam. Did not get picked up immediately, so I got picked up into the JAG program and went to Campbell Law School. Came out and became a U.S. Navy JAG officer. Spent 5 years active, another 11 in the reserves. A lot of that was in active reserve, but a total of 16. Left the Navy as lieutenant commander. Shortly after coming out, I got involved with some families who lost their sons in a helicopter shoot down in Afghanistan. And I've been writing books. I'm an author. I have 16 books published. 15 of the 16 are military books. But I wrote a military expose about the shoot down of a U.S. Navy Chinook, an Army Chinook helicopter in Afghanistan called Extortion 17. 17 members of SEAL Team 6 were killed. SEAL Team 6, our most elite military unit, were killed along with 13 other Americans. Wrote that book. And from that book, saw how concluded that the Obama Pentagon had either sacrificed these guys intentionally or their deaths were the result of criminal negligence. That changed my life. I began to see how dirty and dastardly the deep state of the federal government can be, even deep state at the Pentagon. Began to work some with Pete Hedgeseth as a result of that. He was with Concerned Veterans for America. We worked on some rules of engagement issues, went from there and wrote a book on a young man, Lieutenant Clint Lawrence, who had been prosecuted under Obama's rules of engagement in 2013. Worked with Pete, wrote the book on that. President Trump pardoned him in 2019. Got involved in, from there, I got involved in the election steal issues, worked closely with Sidney Powell, worked on 3 different legal teams that stopped the 2020 election. One was with Sidney Powell, who's endorsed our campaign. Another was with former North Carolina Chief Justice Mark Martin, a brilliant jurist and a brilliant lawyer. And we did the groundwork for the case that Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, wound up filing directly in the Supreme Court. We were on the ground. I was on the ground team for that case. And then I worked on a 3rd team also, where I served as general counsel. We were mining data, and we saw actually computer vote totals in Georgia and Pennsylvania. And I can tell you, because I've seen the evidence, that votes are being scraped from President Trump with these computer votes all night long. So from there, I went to, got involved, of course, in defending some J6 patriots. And I've had President Trump pardon my young J6 client, Elliot Bechet. I'm probably one of just a handful of lawyers in the country that's had the President of the United States pardon 2, not 1, but 2 of my clients, and both were political prosecutions. One was Lieutenant Lawrence, and the other was a J6 kid who all he did was walk in and walk out. And from there, I got involved in defending against medical tyranny during the COVID scam. When I say COVID scam, so much of it was a scam. I'm not saying people didn't get COVID, but it's a scam that, for example, that cloth, mask can stop viral penetration. That's a scam. It's a scam to say that do you take the jab, you won't get COVID, just like Biden himself said. So I got involved there and was involved in major federal litigation, trying to block the implementation of that mandate, the vax mandate. Not only represented 78 plaintiffs, we sued the Savannah nuclear plant, went all the way to the Court of Appeals in Richmond. Biden backed down, and also represented some individual clients who didn't want to take it for religious reasons with the EEOC. So I've been very, very involved in those matters, and one thing led to another, and here we are today.
Listen, I'm going to backtrack for just 1 second. I know that you are friends with Secretary Hedgeseth. If you see him or talk to him, please thank him. He actually signed a document that kept the monument in Arlington Cemetery. the Reconciliation Monument that was created by the North and the South as a unification after the Civil War, that the woke folks took down. He just approved putting it back up. So we do very much appreciate that. There's a gentleman by the name of Kirk Lyons out of Black Mountain who was also part of that team, trying desperately to keep that monument. We've got to stop this infiltration of woke. And you're right. If Trump goes down in the 2026 election, woke comes back in full force. So we appreciate that fully. It sounds very much like you are digging into some of these. What committees would you like to be on if you get to DC? Have you?
Well, obviously, I have a heart for U.S. military, and as I mentioned last night, if you stop and think about it, the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps were all formed even before the Declaration of Independence was signed. All were formed in 1775. And in terms of our federal institutions, those are the rock solid institutions, baby. Let me tell you. And I can tell you that what's happened is we have had hard attacks against our military through woke policies. We saw what happened when Biden stole the election. The first thing Lord Austin did was come in and have a stand down for 60 days, just totally ridiculous. I can tell you that I know for a fact that right after October 7th, when Israel was invaded, that the Biden Pentagon sent a dude wearing pantyhose and high heels into a paratrooper unit on the front lines in Germany that was positioned to go in the Middle East if necessary. There's been an attack against our armed forces. So that my heart is largely there. I'd like to serve on Veterans Affairs. I'm a veteran myself. And I feel very, very strongly. I will go to Harris Teeter because they have veterans parking. And it's not for me. It's for my fellow veterans who served in the armed forces. So that's something that's very, very important to me. I also think that I could be very helpful in the Judiciary Committee. And because, as I say, when you asked me a moment ago, Kay, 3 issues that will be front burner issues. The third of those, and again, I'm not saying one's more important than the others, but the third of those is out of control federal judges. And they've got to be, the Congress, people don't realize, has the ability to curtail the judicial tyranny that we are battling right now. You got 677 federal judges, half of them roughly are Democrats, and those think they can tell the president what to do. They are called inferior courts by Article 3 of the Constitution. So I would say, they're only 24 hours a day, but if somebody said, Don, pick your two, there will be armed services and judiciary. Hope that helps.
Yeah, very much so. What we've had out here in Western North Carolina, we had a terrible hurricane.
Right.
And we are still recovering. I just, in fact, 2 days ago, was driving around in Swannanoa, and it's still a disaster area in many places. What kinds of things can you do to help us overcome something that's now almost a year ago?
Yes, that's a great question. I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm from the eastern part of the state, and let me start from a global answer and zero in on your question. It's like the western counties and eastern counties are overlooked. There was a huge storm in this part of the state called Matthew years ago. You may remember, and millions of dollars were allocated to help victims in the eastern part of the state, and they were never dispersed. And Roy Cooper did not disperse them when Whatley was in office during this time as North Carolina chair. Did not call the government on the carpet for not dispersing funds that the General Assembly had given. The western part of the state, we saw one of the things that makes me the angriest about all of it is that storm Helene comes through, and of course it's a fluke. In some ways it's a fluke because I grew up in the Outer Banks where, near the Outer Banks in the eastern part of the state, which has had more hits from hurricanes than any place in the country. So I know about hurricanes. I never did, but a lot of people would flee to the west when storms were coming in. And then you have Helene do what it did on September 27th. And before that, a few years before, even Hugo cuts an inward course and hits Charleston and Columbia and Charlotte. And but so the thing that makes me, I think, one of the angriest things about it is that the storm hits on the 27th, and we don't see any federal response from the U.S. military until October 3rd. That is absolutely inexcusable. And I mean, I'm a Navy guy. We have two USNS ships, the Hope and the Comfort. These are big white ships and like hospital ships. So the Red Cross on. We send our military in, to provide disaster relief all over the world. And yet this fool sits back and does nothing. And you and I know, and you've experienced some of this from weathering the storm yourself, it's in the first 24 hours that are the most crucial in terms of getting people out, getting aid in. One of the things that I'm proposing, and this goes back to my military experience, is that we, in the United States military, we have 11 what we call unified commands. And I don't want to get too technical here, but 6 of those have to do with geography. In other words, we have United States Indo-Pacific Command to fight a war in the Pacific Ocean. We have United States Europe Command, United States Africa Command. These are commands based on geography. We have 5 that are based on mission criticality or mission purpose. United States Cyber Command to do cyber warfare. STRATCOM, Strategic Command, shoots missiles. Transportation Command, those are planes that take transportation of military goods over the world. I want to have what I call United States Disaster Relief Command. What would that mean? That means we would organize a functional part of the military, which would be commanded by a 4-star general or admiral, just like our other commands. That command would be sitting somewhere. Maybe it would be sitting at Bragg, but we would have generators. We would have water. We would have first aid equipment. We would have evacuation equipment ready to go instantaneously, so that as soon as that storm passes, we're moving in and we're helping people. I'm going to be pushing that hard. That's one thing that we can deal with in the future when this happens again. Now, what about with helping folks right now? I want to see tax credits and tax relief to the entire western part of the state. Matter of fact, I'm running on abolishing the income tax, but I think if you live in one of the 25 counties of western North Carolina, from now in Apponeidon, you should be exempt from paying any income taxes at all until we get the residual effects of this disastrous hurricane done. So I'm going to push for tax relief. And that's from an immediate standpoint, but from a broader standpoint, I'm going to push, and I will use my relationship with Secretary Hegseth on this to see if we can get a military command ready to go. And, we dodged a bullet in eastern North Carolina. This storm, by the grace of God, that was headed into the Outer Banks, it moved. But if you'd had a U.S. military disaster relief command ready to go, fly them out of Bragg with Chinook and Black Hawk helicopters and get in there, pull people out. We had the ability to do that on September 28th, and Biden did not do it. And I feel very, very strongly we got to be prepared next time.
Well, we appreciate that. Abbi and I and a bunch of our friends were very quick to, even if it was just making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for first responders. What we found was we created sort of these little kits that the first responders could take with them on the road. We ended up finding out that most of those they gave to people that were in trouble instead of eating them themselves. They gave them away. So there's a lot of stuff that us mountain people really sort of jumped in and helped. What, Abbi, within a day?
Yeah, I mean, me and Kay probably stood there and made over 450 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, to the point that I can't look at peanut butter. But I'm very grateful that we were able to do that for them, because I mean, obviously they above and beyond. But I absolutely love your ideas of the disaster command like that. That's absolutely, I've never heard anything like that before. That's incredible.
And God bless you for that. And that just underscores the point I was making. We have folks on the ground, Samaritan's Purse to Cajun Navy, Baptist men. It's we the people who step in for that week-long period before Joe Biden ever woke up from a coma and ordered a U.S. helicopter come in. And they were blocking civilian aircraft coming in. They're just obstructionists. By the way, one other thing, and then I'll leave the question. I want FEMA gone. It's got to be gone. FEMA was nothing but obstructionist. I will move for its elimination. If you have a U.S. Disaster Relief Command and a U.S. military, we can get supplies in, life-saving supplies, and then turn it over to state and local authorities and to volunteers. FEMA has been nothing but obstructionist. I believe it's cost lives. It's cost people their property. The whole joke of, you get, 400, whatever it is, you can't do anything with the money they're supposed to give you, and you don't get your money anyway. And we just got to get, like President Reagan said, get the government off the backs of the people. This is a useless agency that's proven over and over again that it's about sustaining its own power and not really helping people. So I meant to add that to an answer to your earlier question, and it just came to me, Kay. So got to
No
go.
problem.
FEMA's got to go.
Abby, do you have any more questions?
I asked this of Congressman Edwards, but if you had a message to give to the people that were here that's still affected by the hurricane, what would it be?
When we go to, I would say I go to 1 Corinthians 13. And this may be a bit tacky, some might think, but I really believe it. When you go to the end of it, 1 Corinthians 13 is called the love chapter. But there are three things that remain: faith, hope, and love. So it gets called a love chapter because that is the climax of the great writing. But faith and hope, keep hope alive, continue to relish in hope and faith, and don't let go of those two great eternal characteristics that will be with us forever. And with hope and with faith, we can do a lot of things supernaturally that we could not do in the flesh. And that is a spiritual answer. But there is help on the way. If I get in the United States Senate, you're going to have a warrior on your side. I have a very special place for our mountain counties and our eastern counties, because as I mentioned to Kate earlier, these two regions have been basically looked over and not treated fairly. Maybe it's for a number of reasons, I don't know, but I've got a very, very special place in my heart for those 25 counties and for our coastal counties as well. We have 19 counties here in eastern North Carolina. I'm in New Bern right now, and that have bound together and fighting the attempt by Phil Berger and the Fisheries Commission to block shrimping, which is their way of life. I was down here in Belhaven on the 4th of July. I found out the fish that I used to catch as a boy, flounder and rock and salt herring, I'd get arrested if I caught them now. And so our way of life in the eastern and western parts of the state are under fire, and I got a passion for it. You're going to have somebody that's going to step in the ring with boxing gloves on, and I won't stop fighting until we get relief. I'm hoping and praying that by the time I am sworn in, that the residual damage of that storm has taken care of. But if not, and in the future, you're going to have a warrior like you've never had before, and I'm looking forward to representing you.
So let's talk for a second about the 2026 election. As you know, when a presidential election takes place, as many as 75% of people turn out. The second part to that is during a midterm, which is 2026, our 250th anniversary of the United States, we get about 50% of the people to vote. How do you think we can get more conservatives, Republicans to come out and vote? Abbi and I are now part of a team that is going to be working on making sure we get great numbers out in 2026 to ensure we keep Republicans in all of the various seats. Do you have any insight into how we could get more people to come out and vote?
I wish I had all the answers, but I do have some thoughts. George Barna, who is a pollster, who has been a pollster for Southern Baptist and for matters of religious significance in the United States for the last couple of decades, released a poll just before the 2024 presidential election. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe he said something like 39 million Christians across the country either were not registered or would not participate in the election. And I think right in our churches is where, in many cases, we have to start. There are many Christians. If evangelical Christians came out and voted, if you're voting just on and most, although not all, we've got some liberal churches out there, but most are going to vote on moral-based issues that we all believe in. We wouldn't even we didn't even worry about North Carolina ever electing a Democrat governor again, or really, we wouldn't have to worry about the Senate race. So I think we've got to look really, first of all, at our churches and try to find folks that think they don't make a difference and help the education they do make a difference. I mean, you stop and think about Bush versus Gore in 2020. was decided on a handful of quote unquote hanging chads. My friend Robert Burns, Mayor of Monroe, was elected, and I don't think this will happen next time. I think he'll win quite handily. He was elected on a coin toss. He was tied with a Democrat. They flipped the coin, and Robert became the mayor. So these are real examples. And so we got to find people that are closest to us. I think for the three of us are obviously committed evangelical conservatives, and we have folks around us. But I think the answer in many cases is right under our noses. I mean, I suppose we can look at voting rolls also, that folks who vote only, who are Republican, but vote only in presidential elections, don't vote in the off year, and we can try to reach out to those folks as well. That's getting into a more sophisticated type of model. But I think we got to look in our churches first, and I think if we do that, we've got an opportunity to pull this thing off in 2026.
But a lot of churches are afraid. The government has done a great job of separation of church and state, but have done it wrong in that the government was supposed to stay out of church, but the church was not supposed to stay out of government. And the churches are afraid. They don't want to get involved. They were okay with closing down during COVID instead of, they should have been the ones that were open, not the casinos.
Yeah, well, correct. And casinos are essential, but churches aren't. Give me a break. Separation of church and state is one of those three major constitutional fictions. The second one being that we're a democracy, we're not. We're a constitutional republic. And the third being that, there are three co-equal branches of government. No, Congress is supposed to be the dominant branch, and the judiciary is supposed to be the weakest branch. Separation of church and state is not there. But it's a phrase that has been used either by the left to intimidate evangelical churches. Well, let me tell you something. The liberal churches, they're not about quote unquote separation of church and state. I remember liberal churches in Washington County, but when I was growing up, putting people on buses and giving them a Democrat ballot, taking them to the polls, and then maybe they'd take them to Hardee's or somewhere afterwards. The liberal churches have never bowed down to that ridiculous notion. It's only evangelical churches that have. And what we have to do is that we have to educate the people. This is a constitutional fiction. There was a group of pastors, Kay, maybe you've heard of this, Abbi, maybe you have also, that for years would have a preach a political sermon day. And I think John MacArthur, who just passed away, was part of it. But one Sunday every year, they would preach a openly conservative political sermon and then print the sermon and send a copy to the IRS and say, I dare you to take away my 501c3 status. You know how many times the IRS revoked the 501c3 status? Zero, exactly. So listen, it is up to us. The Bible says many are called, few are chosen. You ladies have been chosen to help educate. Some of us have been chosen to help educate. We have to educate people because knowledge is power. And once there's a realization that this is a bunch of hogwash, they use falsehoods and fiction to sustain their power. You take the jab, you won't get COVID. In the meantime, they lampoon ivermectin, which is a much more effective, medicine against COVID, because Big Pharma can't make tons of money off it because the patents expire. They'll use one lie after the other. The Affordable Care Act, like I want to have affordable insurance. But in reality, it's the Astronomical Cost Act. Who can say that their insurance costs have gone down or the access to medical care has gotten better since Obamacare? You can't say it. Biden pushed what he called the Inflation Reduction Act or whatever it was. And while inflation was exploding under Biden, largely because he was shutting down oil production, they use language which is 180% opposite of the truth to get their way. And we have to shed light the light of truth on all this. So it's going to take work, Kay, but we have to have a commitment to truth. You're going into there and the pastor says, I'm going to lose my 501c3. No, you're not. Matter of fact, I think the Trump administration has already instructed the IRS, you can't even go after any church for that. And the IRS has never, ever, to my knowledge, and certainly not on Preach a Political Sermon Day, ever revoked a church's 501c3 status over political involvement. And here's the thing about it. When you look at Revelation By the way, they say if you read Revelation, you get a blessing. I should read it more often. Whoever reads the words of this book, it's a blessing. That's the start of the book. But when it's talking about the 7 churches of Asia Minor, I look at the church in America, and especially since World War II, we become the church of Laodicea. In other words, you were lukewarm, so I spit you out of my mouth. We got to get rid of this lukewarm stuff. If you go back to the American Revolution, think about the Black Robe Regiment and some of these pastors that were preaching against oppressive tyranny in the pulpit and then go out and take a musket after church. This is a part of American heritage where our pastors are should be speaking for freedom. And why is this? Because if you stop and think about it, the gift of the American Constitution in large part was to create a constitutional republic where the gospel can be preached without fear of persecution. And if we don't defend that, we saw what's happening in Canada already during COVID. They're arresting pastors. We even saw pastors getting arrested for holding church services in the United States during COVID. So it is crucially important that we defend this gift that we've given so that we continue to have the freedom ultimately to preach the gospel. And our people need to understand that.
Yeah, that reminds me, it makes me think of the verse in Ephesians chapter 6. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and the principalities and the I can't remember the exact wording, but you know the verse I'm talking
Yes, I
about.
do. I know what
And
you're
it
talking
makes
about.
me think of that, and it's reassuring to know that, throughout
Right.
that it's not
Right.
Democrats that we need to worry about. It's not this or that, but it's all. Oh, I'm getting chills. It's obviously the schemes of the enemy.
Right. It's not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities of this world. We're in spiritual, it is a spiritual battle which manifests itself in the political realm. As I've said before, it is a biblical worldview on the one side versus, the one world globalism on the other. And one world globalism is opposite of a biblical worldview. Again, you go back to the Tower of Babel, you go back to the creation of nations. There's another one that I want to quote Paul, and hope this is an encouragement. And Kay, I hope this encourages you. I fought the good fight. I've kept the race. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. If you look at Paul's admonition, I fought the good fight. I finished the race, kept the faith. Never said I won. Never said I won the primary. Never said I won the election. But it is the fighting of the good fight. Just like you all, when you took the time to make 450 peanut butter sandwiches for first responders, and they gave those sandwiches to people who are hungry, who are direct victims of the storm, you are fighting the good fight. We are called to fight the good fight. I'm in this race because I'm trying to fight the good fight. I hope we win. But that's not my responsibility. Isn't to guarantee victory. Although I believe we're going to win this race, but it's nonetheless to fight the fight. You look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel when he was cast in the lions into fiery furnace. And he was cast in the lion's den, and those 3 guys were in the fiery furnace, and they said, we will not bow down to your statue. Our God can save us. But even if he does not, we still are not going to bow down, Nebuchadnezzar, to your statue. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They just, and then the king looks out and he sees a vision of 4 people in that furnace, But just remember, our job is to fight for righteousness and leave the rest up to him. So I would encourage anybody hearing my voice, heard you all, hang on to that, and hopefully great will be your reward in heaven for it.
Oh, we're gonna have church right here.
Well, we can. Why not?
Have you heard, and I'm sure you have because we have all over social media, that the RNC and the NCGOP are all sort of quietly, not even so quietly, backing Whatley? How do you overcome that? And he's apparently raising money that we're being told can't be used till after the primary. So I've, of course, stuck my nose in that and said, so that means when Don Brown wins, he gets all that money?
First off, Kay, yes, there's zero question in my mind that what is happening is what you've described. The establishment of the RNC, John Thune, who right now is blocking President Trump's ability to have recess appointments while the Senate's on vacation, is endorsing Whatley. The Republican Senate Committee will. What you're referring to, I think, is recently there was an announcement of a big fundraiser in September hosted by Charlotte Pipe and Foundy for Whatley, paid for by the Whatley Victory Committee and the Republican National Committee. and the North Carolina Republican Party. And it created a firestorm because it is what it's meant to look like, a Whatley endorsement.
Right.
You look at that thing and it absolutely looks like, it's like, if it looks like a duck and smells like a duck, it is a duck. Well, on the backside, the Republican establishment tried to say, oh, well, a joint fundraiser is legal, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about whether a joint fundraiser is legal or not. I could care less. And I really don't care whether the RNC wants to endorse Whatley, go for it. I could care less. I want we the people, not they, the RNC. But let me just say this, that, and I haven't, you're asking me, and I will respond to this question. I haven't gone aggressively against them on social media, but when you look at that posting, it looks like an endorsement, and you might try to, and because that's exactly what it is. Now, you might try to say, well, we don't endorse anybody, or it's legal, or Don Brown could have done it, or the money might have gone here. Nobody cares about that. I've talked to multiple state party chairs and district chairs in the Republican Party in North Carolina who've never heard of it. And if they haven't heard of it, the average Joe on the street or Jane on the street hadn't heard of it. It was intended to come across as an endorsement of Whatley. And I have challenged the state Republican Party through some of my party, my county chair friends, and I won't say their name. They've asked me not to. Jason, if you really want to clear this up, then you issue a press release saying, we apologize for any confusion shown by that apparent endorsement. We do not endorse Michael. We do not endorse Don. Okay, if this joint fundraising committee is legal, that's fine, but you got to make that clear. And coming back and saying it's legal doesn't take away from the fact that people saw it as an endorsement. It doesn't. So listen, honestly, that's helped us more than it's hurt us because it's exposed a lot of the hypocrisy. So, I mean, it's not like I'm playing my violin because their hypocrisies actually helped their campaign, but you got to be honest. You can't on the one hand say, line of organization, got to be neutral. And then have the chair of the Republican National Committee actively running for the United States Senate against an opponent for 1 month before he steps down. That is contradictory. You got to be consistent and play consistently by the rules. So, yes, they're going to raise tons of money. They're trying to cut off our ability to raise money. We're going directly to the people, and we're going to leave it up to the people and leave it up to him and see what happens. But I believe we're going to win this race.
What is your website and how do people donate?
Well, thank you. You can go to brown4nc.com, BROWNFOR, the word, not the number, brown4nc.com. And there's a donate site there. All you got to do is click, and it's easy as pumpkin pie. And as I've said before, we need lots of money because they're going to try to outspend us. They probably will. I'll say this, Kamala outraised Trump 2-1.
Oh, yeah.
Bloomberg had billions, and still, Jeb Bush was the coronated nominee in 2016. Yep. They laughed at Trump. So we have hope. Going back to a question Abbi asked earlier, I believe in hope and faith. We have hope, but I would rather have $50 from 1 million people or $25 than 2 or 3 huge donors for many reasons. Number one, we need the grassroots, we the people. This campaign is about we the people versus they the establishment. So go to brown4nc.com and click whatever you can do, and it will all take care of itself. But we need numbers, and I appreciate you asking the question.
Yeah. I love that. Easy as pumpkin pie. I'm gonna start using that. So
pumpkin spice, because that's out now.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I'm not sure, but I'll tell you one thing. I really appreciate the work you're doing, Abbi, and Kay. You all are salt and light, not just in the western part of the state, but all over the state. I know that our last, I was really amazed at the number of hits we got on the last podcast that we did. So I commend you for that. And I commend you also for, we've got to have, Republicans in their 20s. Let me rephrase. We got to have patriots. We have to have patriots in their 20s. And Republican registration as Republican follows patriotism in many cases, but that's what we got to have. We have to have, and what's the difference between a patriot and a Republican? Well, I'm a Republican and I'm also a patriot, but a patriot is one who, regardless of political affiliation, is willing to shake their fist directly into the face of tyranny, even when the odds are against it. Just like our founding fathers and the patriots who took down the British Empire, they all said, this is impossible. You're facing the most powerful army in the world, the greatest nation. But by the grace of God and by lots of prayer and determination, patriotism prevailed. We need patriots. Let's shake our fists in the face of tyranny, whether it's institutional tyranny in the Republican Party or whether it's the United States Congress refusing, to end the national debt and continuing to fund, corrupt organizations. Shake our fists in the face of it, and let's take this country back.
I love that. Anything else you want to say, Kate?
I think we've got it.
Awesome. Well, I have so much enjoyed having you both on. So yes, thank you, Don Brown. We're so excited to see all the great things you're going to do. So yeah, you heard it here. Stay informed, stay vigilant, stay excited. Till next time.